Hello and welcome to Veteran Voices. I'm Jay Baker, and today I have Warrant Officer Andrea Cote with me, and we are going to be discussing her adventures for 30 plus years in the military. So welcome to the show, Andrea.
Thank you. Good morning.
And tell me, when did you first start in the military?
I joined actually the Communication Reserves in 1991 in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan.
Okay, a prairie girl.
Yeah.
Excellent. So we went Army, and what kind of units were you with? Were you with combat units, combat trades, and that kind of stuff? Or?
My time in the reserves was just with my reserve unit, and then my first tour, I was still in the reserves, and I did that with 5 Brigade in French. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you mentioned tours. So where did you end up going for your tours?
So my first tour, 96, 97, was in Bosnia, and my next tour, 98, 99, was in Central African Republic.
Okay.
And then 2000, 2001, I went to East Africa, and then 2002, 2003, I went to Southwest Asia.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what was it like as a young woman in the 90s now, joining the military and soon to be deployed off to Bosnia?
You know, I actually always had a lot of fun. I really did. I was always pretty much the only girl everywhere I went. There would be other girls on tour, of course, and other girls in the platoon, but not necessarily in my section. And I always had a good time. I always had a lot of fun.
Okay. And with your deployments, especially your early deployments in Bosnia, what was your feelings, first deployed out of country, first time? How did you communicate at home with loved ones and friends?
I'll be honest with you. I was excited. I was really excited, but I was scared.
Yeah.
I got to admit I was scared. The United Nations had just left, and NATO was going in for the first time. So we were the implementation force, the I-4. And the fighting had literally just stopped. And so when we arrived there, you didn't really see anybody anywhere. People were all still in hiding. You could see the remnants of United Nations camps that had been established. And yeah, it was a little bit scary. There was a lot of landmines around. Luckily, we did not find any. That was good. That was really good.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
And your time in Africa, I know I've been to Africa myself, and it's quite a unique environment, something that most people would never ever see.
Yeah.
Tell me about your experiences in Africa.
Africa is a very, very, very different place, and unique to say the least. I used to tell people, before you go there, you need to get rid of any thoughts you have of North America, because it's not North America. And you are definitely not going to find your typical North American households or social situations. It's very different. And you can't judge other people with our yardstick, of course. Having said that, I had a really great time. I worked with an orphanage, actually, and we brought over some swing set and a slide. We had that brought over, and we built it in the orphanage for the kids. That was in Central Africa. In East Africa, I worked again with orphans, and just out of our main camp, they were sisters, religious sisters, and they would take in orphans and teach them. So they were teaching sisters. And so we brought over a couple of tri-walls. I had twinned their school with a school in Kingston, which is where I was posted. And we brought over a couple tri-walls of school supplies for the kids.
Okay.
So that was a lot of fun too. Yeah.
I know you say you have to forget about your North American, and I understand that, where you have this sense of values and North American standards, that this is how I operate, this is our morals and our values. And when you're in an environment like Africa, it's so poor, those values go out the window when they can't eat. And it's heartbreaking to see, isn't it?
Yeah, it absolutely, it can be. But you know, I've never seen such happy people. And the children were happy. They didn't have all Xboxes and, you know, PlayStations or anything like that. They might have a rubber tire or a little bird, sort of a toy made out of wood, but they were absolutely happy with it. And it's definitely a lesson that our kids in this day and age would never see unless they went.
Right.
But yeah, it was amazing to see the kids so happy. They were actually afraid of me at first.
Okay.
Yeah.
And why is that?
Because they'd never seen another white person or
Okay.
a white person before.
Okay.
Yeah, so when I went to go deliver the school supplies, I had seen them a couple of times, but we had just gone in and sort of walked around and then left. And this time the kids were actually there at school. And so I sat down on the steps and a little one came and sat beside me. And he looked at me very intensely. And then he slowly reached out and touched my hand. And he started rubbing my skin because I guess maybe he thought the white would come off. But of course it didn't. And because they didn't speak English or French. So we couldn't communicate, you know, in verbal sense, but just smiles and yeah, it was pretty funny.
Excellent. And your time in Bosnia, I know you said that everyone was still in hiding
Yeah.
at the beginning of your tour. How was it now as you progressed through your tour and getting more established? Were they able to relax a bit, come out and understand you?
Yeah, yeah. So people started to come out a little bit, and you'd see cars on the road again, and it's kind of funny because oftentimes you'd see almost an entire family in one vehicle or on a vehicle, hanging off the vehicle, or you'd see a tractor with a trailer full of hay, and again, the family members, you know, sitting on top and beside, and so on like that. It was interesting to see. Again, much different than you'd see here in North America, for sure.
Right.
Yeah.
And you mentioned earlier that you had a lot of fun and you had great experiences. Can you share one of them?
Whew. There's a lot of them. Well, I guess one of the fun experiences, so as a communicator, we don't often necessarily get out of camp. I was running the message center and the switchboard, which is a camp specific job. And however, I'm always up for an adventure. So I went to the other SIGs who were the SIGs that were posted with the RCR. This was in East Africa. And I asked if I could go on one of their recce's. And we had just gotten vehicles in. That was the vehicle's first time in on tour. So they said, sure, and I thought this would be a pretty good thing. So there I was, and I was trying to stand in the back in the hatch, but I was too short, so I couldn't see properly. So I went and I sat up sort of under the turret, I guess you would say, and I ended up straddling the turret and holding on for dear life as we went on these recce's because in Eritrea where we were, it was all mountainous. And it was nothing but switchbacks, left and right and left and right. So you really did have to absolutely hold on for dear life. And then of course the dust and everything else. You come back and you almost look like a local person because your skin had changed color with all the dust. Yeah, that was a good time.
So now as you're in your twilight of your career and you've been able to see a large transformation of the CAF throughout the years. How do you feel as a woman seeing how things were when you first joined versus what it is now?
Again, being the only girl, I'm not sure what other women experiences have been. Mine have all been positive for the most part. I think the awareness is excellent. I'm really happy to see. I was working up in Ottawa when the Sexual Misconduct Response Center opened up at first, and I was really happy to see that there's resources like that that are available. And it's no longer well, I wouldn't say it's not a stigma, but it's spoken about, and it's out there. And people acknowledge that, sure, we've had some issues, and but it's good to see that there's so many resources now for the ladies to go to.
Right.
And gentlemen, as the case may be.
And with all your deployments, especially in Bosnia in the 90s and in Africa and that kind of stuff, do you ever find that you were at a bit of more of a disadvantage or more at risk being a woman in these environments as opposed to your male counterparts?
Yeah. I don't know if I'd say I was a risk per se. I did end up having some interesting experiences again in Central Africa. They wanted to buy me. So when we went, we deployed out of the main camp, and there was myself and 2 other soldiers, and they thought I was a gift, actually, for the site commander, the local site commander.
Nice.
So it took a while to convince them that I actually wasn't a gift, that I actually was a Canadian soldier. They had a hard time believing that I was there to do a job. And so it made it a little bit awkward. Because there was only the 3 of us, we split the 24 hours a day into 3 different shifts. And so for me to do a shift on my own, they were a little bit like my fellow soldiers. They were a little bit worried at first about me being there on my own on shift.
Right.
But it worked out. But yeah, it definitely made things a little different at first.
More challenging.
Yeah.
Yeah. What was your greatest accomplishment so far in your time?
That's a good question. Being rather a simple sort of a person. Honestly, it's going to sound silly, I'm sure, but rucksack marches.
Well, I could understand that. Being a short stature, it's a little hard sometimes to keep up with the long-legged guys like myself.
Yeah. In 2 Brigade, we started doing the 20-kilometer or 22-kilometer rucksack marches, and we did them with the whole brigade. And so it's...
Oh, that accordion must have just stretched out forever.
Actually,
like that.
No, it was pretty good because they timed it. Yeah, so they'd have a unit leave, and then they would wait a certain amount of time and then have the next unit leave.
Okay.
So it wasn't too bad. But it was a real sense of accomplishment at the end.
Right.
Finishing it every time, and of course there's always people falling out. It's just I was never one of them. So
Good
yeah,
for you.
yeah,
Yeah, that's a challenge on its own. Even just someone for my stature to throw on the ruck and go.
Yeah.
That accordion can just be a killer. And someone who's a little bit short statured with shorter legs, they're just going a mile a minute trying to keep up to my small steps.
Absolutely. And being a senior NCO as well, like we were always at the back because the officers are up at the front. So we're at the back. So you really need to stretch it out a lot to make sure that you stay up with the troops too.
Yeah, and as a senior NCO, you have that expectation that you're competent and able to do this, and
absolutely.
So, yeah, I can see it being a little bit more of a challenge.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
Good on you.
But I always did I always did all my ruck marches. I always finished them all with everybody. I never fell back. So it was every time I did one, it was, yay me.
Right.
Yeah. There's a lot of attrition, a lot of changeover. A lot of women, when they start having kids, aren't necessarily staying in. Having said that, I've got 3 kids, and I've been posted, promoted. I've gone overseas. I've done all those things, and still being a mom and a soldier is special, to say the least.